I never imagined my wife would betray me with the one person I trusted most. For months, they sat across from me at dinner, smiled at me, laughed with me, and pretended everything was normal. What they didn't know was that when I finally discovered the truth, I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to beg. And what happened next ended up costing one of them everything. Let me ask you something. Have you ever looked into the eyes of someone you loved more than life itself, someone you built a home and a family with, and realized that every word out of their mouth for the past year was a calculated lie? It's a specific kind of cold that settles into your chest. It doesn't happen all at once. It starts as a faint whisper of doubt, a subtle shift in the atmosphere of your own home, before it crashes down and rips your entire reality away. For years, my life was a picture of suburban perfection. We lived in a quiet, close-knit neighborhood, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone. Right across the street lived Mark and Sarah. To say we were close would be an understatement. We were practically one big family. Our kids were the exact same age, growing up like siblings, running back and forth between our lawns. We hosted dinners together multiple times a week. We planned joint vacations. Mark wasn't just a neighbor. He was the brother I never had. We shared everything. When he decided to run for a local board of education seat as a massive underdog, I was the first one by his side. I spent countless nights helping him design his campaign materials, running through debate prep, and refining his speeches. My wife, who was a highly respected, long-time employee within the school district, used every ounce of her social capital to get the word out. Against all odds, Mark won by a handful of votes. That victory changed him. Being on the board became the center of his universe. He joined every committee available, soaking up the local status. Because of his new role and my wife's position in the district, they suddenly had a lot of work to do together. Late-night meetings, school events, weekend seminars. I was proud of them. I thought they were making a difference. I was completely blind. The first rail cracks appeared in the winter. My wife's phone became an extension of her hand. It was an excessive, obsessive level of texting that started to alienate me and our children. She was physically in the room, but her mind was entirely elsewhere. It got so bad that I finally begged her for a simple boundary, a no phones at the dinner table rule. She agreed reluctantly, but the dinners that followed were miserable. She would sit there pouting, staring at her lap, vibrating with anxiety until she eventually just gave up and started pulling the phone out anyway. It wasn't just the phone. The energy between her and Mark had shifted. It was a subtle, charged dynamic that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. Sarah noticed it too. One evening, after a particularly tense neighborhood gathering, Sarah and I actually confronted them. We asked them outright if something strange was going on. They laughed it off. They looked us dead in the eye and swore up and down that it was just school district business. Mark smiled his easy, charismatic smile and told me I was overthinking it. And I believed him. We both did. Because the human mind will do incredible acrobatics to avoid seeing a truth that will destroy its world. Then came the day the illusion shattered permanently. It was a quiet afternoon. My wife had gone out to run errands and left her email logged in on our home computer. I wasn't snooping. I just happened to sit down to check a tracking number, and there it was, an open thread with her longtime therapist. My eyes caught Mark's name. The email stated that Mark would be joining her at her upcoming therapy session again. My blood turned to ice. Why would my neighbor, my best friend, be attending private therapy sessions with my wife? And what did she mean by again? A wave of nausea hit me as I typed Mark's name into the search bar. What I found next dismantled my life piece by piece. There were emails spanning weeks. I immediately logged into our cellular account to pull the itemized text records. What I saw felt mathematically impossible. Since the late summer, they had been exchanging hundreds of messages every single day. By the holidays, the volume peaked at nearly 500 texts a day. 500! I sat there, staring at the dates, and a horrifying realization washed over me. During Thanksgiving and Christmas, we had hosted both of our extended families. Our parents, siblings, and children were all gathered around the tree and the dinner table. Mark and Sarah had joined us. The text log showed that during the exact hours we were opening gifts and sharing holiday meals, my wife and Mark were texting each other from across the same room. They were whispering to each other digitally right under my nose, and right under Sarah's nose, smiling at us while secretly betraying us. The betrayal wasn't a sudden mistake. It was a lifestyle. When my wife walked through the front door that evening, I didn't yell. I didn't smash anything. I just handed her the printouts. She froze. The color completely drained from her face. Seeing her look at those papers, the realization that she was caught was a hollow victory. There was no defense left. She broke down and admitted everything. She told me she and Mark had fallen in love. It just happened, she cried, using the classic defense of someone refusing to take accountability. I don't know how, but I love him. I just don't feel anything for you anymore. I'm sorry. She explained that it started during a school district trip. A hotel room, a line crossed, and then a rapid descent into a full-blown affair. As she spoke, I lay face down on the couch. I couldn't look at her. The air felt too thick to breathe. Then came the most twisted part. She revealed that they had already planned to divorce both of us. The secret meetings with her therapist? They weren't to fix anything. They were using the therapist to figure out how to break the news to me and Sarah gently, because they claimed they were so concerned for our well-being. Later, when Sarah and I pieced the timeline together, we realized that was a lie too. They never planned on being honest. They were going to divorce us under some other pretext, wait a few months, and then miraculously to discover their feelings for each other down the line to save face. 2 months later, my wife packed her bags and moved out. I was utterly destroyed. I'm not ashamed to admit that I cried every single day. The grief was a physical weight on my chest. I stared at my kids, wondering how this would warp their sense of security, their understanding of love and trust. But beneath the profound sorrow, a quiet, dark anger began to take root. I am not a victim. And I am not a shrinking violet. They had humiliated me, deceived my children, and shattered a family without a second thought. They expected Sarah and me to just quietly fade into the background while they rode off into the sunset together. They forgot who built the stage Mark was standing on. I knew I had one advantage they didn't. Information. By that point, I had everything. The emails. The text records. The confessions. The timeline. Every piece of evidence that proved exactly what they had done. At first, I considered sending everything directly to the school board and the district administration. One email. One click. Their secret would be exposed. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized it wouldn't work. If I came forward as the betrayed husband, I'd immediately be dismissed as bitter and vindictive. People would assume I was acting out of anger. The affair would become secondary. The story would become about me. And I refused to give them that escape route. So instead, I started thinking differently. I asked myself a simple question. What would scare them the most? The answer came almost immediately. Public exposure. Not the affair itself. Not the divorce. Not even the loss of their relationship. What terrified them was the idea of everyone finding out. Their co-workers. Their friends. Their neighbors. The parents they saw at school events. The people who had trusted them for years. That was the one thing they couldn't control. And once I realized that, a plan began to take shape. I created someone who didn't exist. A furious mutual friend. An anonymous person who had supposedly discovered the affair and was absolutely outraged by what they had done. I carefully planted the story. I mentioned that this person was talking about attending the next public Board of Education meeting. I mentioned that they had evidence. I mentioned that they wanted the entire community to know exactly what had been happening behind closed doors. Then I sat back and waited. The reaction was immediate. The confidence that my wife and Mark had shown for months suddenly disappeared. For the first time since I'd uncovered the affair, they looked genuinely afraid. Because unlike me, they couldn't control this situation. They couldn't predict what this mysterious person might do. They couldn't negotiate with them. And they couldn't silence them. Every day that passed seemed to make them more nervous. Every phone call. Every email. Every upcoming meeting. It all became a potential threat. The pressure started building exactly the way I'd hoped it would. Then Mark made the mistake I was counting on. Rather than risk being publicly exposed, he decided to get ahead of the story. He went directly to the board and confessed everything himself. And the moment he did, the first domino finally fell. The fallout was immediate. The superintendent, realizing the massive ethical and political nightmare this posed, strongly recommended that Mark resign immediately, and just like that, the board seat that had been the absolute center of Mark's ego, the position I had helped him build, was gone. Sarah told me he was completely crushed, utterly humiliated, and unable to even get out of bed for days. But the dominoes were only beginning to fall. With Mark's sudden, unexplained resignation, whispers started rippling through the school district. The superintendent, who was actually a longtime personal friend of both Mark and my wife, called my wife into his office. Tearfully, he informed her that because of the massive political fallout and the breach of ethical boundaries, it was no longer appropriate or viable for her to be promoted to the administrative position. The job that had been custom-tailored for her career was pulled away. The district quietly brought in an outside candidate to fill the role. The confusion in the community was palpable. Everyone knew my wife was supposed to get that job. A few days after she lost the promotion, despite our crumbling marriage, she and I took our son out to a diner for his birthday. A well-meaning parent walked up to our table, smiling warmly, and congratulated her on her new administrative role. My wife forced a smile, thanked her, and then excused herself to go cry in the bathroom stall for 20 minutes. I sat at the table, looking at my son, feeling a grim sense of poetic justice. I let the dust settle for a couple of weeks. I watched as their carefully constructed future evaporated. And then, right before my wife officially signed the lease on her new place, I decided to clear the air. I looked at them both and let them in on my little secret. There was never a furious friend. There was no anonymous whistleblower planning to storm the school board meeting. There was no one else. It was just me. The realization that they had panicked and voluntarily handed over their own downfalls because of a ghost I created was the ultimate psychological checkmate. Word travels fast in a small town. Mark grew up here, and my wife had worked in the district for nearly 2 decades. Her once spotless professional reputation has been completely tarnished. She refuses to look me in the eye or speak to me about work, but the grapevine tells me she is isolated and miserable. As for Mark, the once gregarious, charismatic life of the party, the man who loved being seen at local pubs and neighborhood events, has completely gone underground. He rarely leaves his house, only emerging occasionally to mow his lawn with his head down. He is moving out soon, forced into a cramped, low-end townhouse, the only thing he can afford after the reality of child support hits his finances. They claim they are still going to try to make their relationship work. They want to prove to the world that their true love was worth the wreckage. I truly wish them the best of luck with that. It is going to be incredibly difficult to build a beautiful life together when every glance from a neighbor, every trip to the grocery store, and every walk through this town is met with icy silence and whispered judgment. People often ask me if Sarah and I ended up together as the ultimate counter-revenge. The answer is no. We are close friends, and we have been a lifeline for each other through this storm. Nobody else understands the specific grief of this situation quite like she does. We comfort each other, we protect our kids, and we ensure our children still get to see each other and maintain some semblance of normalcy. The healing process is slow. The divorce mediation is wrapping up, and the papers will be final soon. I still have days where the phantom pain of the life I lost hits me in the quiet moments. I still miss the woman I thought she was. But I am moving forward. I started planning trips with my kids, finding joy in building new memories that aren't tainted by deception. Betrayal changes a person. It forces you to realize that you can love someone with every fiber of your being and still not truly know them. But it also teaches you your own strength. They thought they could walk all over me because I was kind, because I was loyal, because I loved them. They mistook my grace for weakness. In the end, karma didn't need to strike them down from above. It simply handed them a mirror, exposed their fear, and let them destroy themselves.